If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. People, what strange, terrifying folklore creature, legend, myth, encounter/story have you had in your life that you believe to be true? Like, fae, banshee, black dog, gnome, elves, etc. The Tennessee Wildman. Basically, it is either a Bigfoot or, in some versions, a feral human that is pushing 7 to 8 feet tall. Legend has it that a carnival barker in the early 1900s caught him in a cage and was putting him on display until he broke out and got away. A lot of the rumors are from East Tennessee, near the Mokies. I've also heard that, during the Civil War, some families decided they didn't want to fight and retreated into the mountains far away from where the army could come find them, and over time they have reverted to being feral humans. Assumed inbreeding has made recessive genes very prominent, making them large and hairy. A Josh Gates expedition on Expedition X found human hair in a cave near some small animal bones that had been torn apart, and their decision was basically just sometimes people just decide to go live in the wilderness and go wild. Some park rangers in the Smokies will candidly tell you they believe it too. There were a couple of sightings during the 1980s of a large, hairy, red-eyed bipedal human-like thing grabbing farm animals and running off into the woods with them, and a few years ago, a couple hiking in the Appalachians on the North Carolina side of the Smokies said they saw something similar. One of the families near where Dennis Martin went missing also said they saw a huge, hairy man with a kid under his arm running straight up a near vertical cliff shortly after Dennis went missing as well. In Camden County, South Jersey, there's a town called Atco that has had a ghost story known as the Atco Ghost. Original, I know, lol. Legend has it that a boy was playing with a ball, and the ball rolled into the street. The boy went to chase after the ball, and a truck driver ran him over, killing him. They say if you go to the end of the same road at night, turn off your car's engine, and blink your headlights on and off 3 times, you'll see the spirit of the boy cross the road. I've personally never done it because, when the legend got really popular in the early 2000s, police started watching the area. I've known people who have done it and claimed to have seen it and others who haven't. My sister did it with a group of her friends a few times and claimed to have seen it. Another group of friends of mine claimed they didn't see anything, but when they got out of their car, they saw a child's handprints on it. The Donkey Lady, San Antonio, Texas. There's a lot of variation in the story depending on where you look, but here's the gist. There was a family on a farm. Husband, wife, and 2 kids. One night, not exactly close, but 2 hours away from me in Springwood Canyon lies a ghost town called Latuda. It used to be a mining town where miners would flock for work in the early 1920s. Supposedly, one of the miners was killed in an accident, and his wife and newborn son were evicted from their home because the company that the husband was a part from provided the house, and since he was dead, they didn't see any reason for them to stick around. With the death of her husband and nowhere to go to provide for her child and herself, the lady went mad and drowned her child in the river. After that, she proceeded to hang herself. Legend has it that the lady is said to wander the ghost town at night. The locals in the nearby town of Helper swear by the legend and always warn passerbys to never wander about the place at night. Stories told around the fire at summer camp always affected me the most. The story of the watermelon baby stands out. The baby grew up with abusive parents who kept him locked up in the basement and only fed him watermelon every few days. Once he was older and harder to control, they allowed him to attend the nearby boys' summer camp. Due to neglect, he looked decrepit but had a massive head with a vertical scar resembling a line on a watermelon. He was incessantly teased for his looks, which ultimately prompted him to kill his fellow campers and counselors. What made this creepy and realistic to me was that my camp had a lodge with pictures of all campers dating back to the early 1900s, and one kid from the 20s had a massive head with a very similar looking scar and scowl on his face. The story was that this was the only summer the camp had to end early. There's also an island close to the camp with a visible cabin where the watermelon baby still resides to this day. New counselors are selected to row out to the island at night to deliver the watermelon and deter any future murders. I heard this at a camp in New Hampshire, and I believe it was told in other states. I can't say it was the most original story, but damn, staring into the eyes of that kid in the picture made me a believer. There's an alpine fairy tale about a shepherd who heard an owl while having breakfast and decided to tease it by repeating its hoot and jokingly inviting it to his table. Suddenly, an owl-headed man appeared, with fierce yellow eyes and clawed hands, and demanded food. He has been invited, so he needs to be treated as a guest, right? So the shepherd gave the owl monster his breakfast, but he was still hungry. The shepherd offered all his milk, cheese, flour, sugar, and other edible stuff, but the owl monster was insatiable. In the end, he devoured all the cows, goats, and sheep and, still not full, decided to eat the shepherd himself. Only a prayer and the sign of the cross saved the man, and the horrible creature disappeared in hellish flames. And that's why you don't ever mock nocturnal animals. In Sweden, we have folklore about a mythical creature called Skogsra, or Hudrin. Skog means forest, and Ra means warden or keeper of something in Swedish. It takes the shape of a beautiful woman, but her back is either hollow, the story I grew up with, or has a tail. She is also described as flirty and is known to seduce men, but back in the day, the most important and prominent part of her story was her being the ruler of the forest. In some stories, she can be helpful depending on her mood. For example, if a child is lost, she can help the child find its way back. She can also grant a hunter luck. But the most common story is that if someone follows her into the woods, that person is never to be seen again. My gran was from Ireland, she told me, and my cousin scary bedtime stories about the banshee. She once told us that when she was 13, she was running an errand for her mom with her sister Mary. They had to go through a wooded area to get to the next small town, which was their destination. There was a small stream where the kids used to fish and play. They were approaching the stream, and from a little distance, Mary said to Gran, "What's that, Annie?" They both stopped and looked. Beside the stream, with her back to them, was a figure of a woman with long, dark hair. She wore a light-colored dress, and her feet were bare. They were silent, so they could hear soft, gentle weeping. Without waiting another minute, my gran said she and Mary turned and ran the other way as fast as they could. When they got home, they told their dad about their adventure. Their mom wasn't too happy that they returned without completing the errand. Their dad said it was probably the banshee. Their mom just rolled her eyes and mumbled something under her breath. The next day, a younger child that the family knew was found face down in the stream in the same place as they saw the woman. It is said that the banshee shows up just before a tragedy or death. In the town of Hamelin, Germany, in the 1200s or so, the town suffered from a rat infestation. A man called the Pied Piper, dressed in colorful clothing, said he could get rid of the rats for a payment. The townsfolk gladly agreed, and the piper proceeded to play music from his pipe. The rats followed. He led them to a river, where they drowned. Afterwards, the townsfolk rejoiced but, for some reason, refused to pay the piper for his service. He said that he'd come back for revenge, and he did. He once again played his pipe in the night, but this time the children of the town followed, entranced by his song. They followed and disappeared into the night, never to be seen again, or drowned in the same river as the rats. There are various versions of this legend, but this is just the one I know, and the creepiest part is that apparently there is historical proof that an event like this actually occurred in Hamelin. I was camping with my family when I was young in the mountains. They told us a legend about a monster in the area that looked like a mix between a bear and a wolf. If you made eye contact with him, he'd eat you. It scared the hell out of us, but my dad spent hours telling us the guy was just joking or hazing us and not to worry. One of the nights I woke up in the tent because I saw this bright light. I thought it was a car that was parked in front of us and was shining its lights on the tent. I moved down by the corner of the door, which had a few inches unzipped, and peeked out to see what the people in the car were doing. It turned out that the moon was just super bright out in nature. I could see everything, almost like a day. After realizing there was no car, I saw this large creature hunched over beside a picnic table nearby. It was huge, its body seemed to be just a little smaller than the table, the kind where 10 people can sit on it. I freaked out and jumped back into my sleeping bag. I heard footsteps circle around the tent, and a silhouette lit up on the side. It looked like some kind of dog, and we started sniffing at the door of the tent by our feet for several seconds. Then the shadow abruptly disappeared, and I didn't hear anything anymore. I have no idea what it was, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the trip. Here in Southeastern Asia, there's a shape-shifting evil creature that loves to feast on the viscera in particular. One version of that is the tik-tik, a black bird with glowing red eyes that flies during the night, looking for prey for its master, the aswang, a general term for vampires, ghouls, black witches, or werebeasts. In some accounts, these blackbirds are even said to be the alter ego that the aswang morphs into. In order to tell when one is in the vicinity, listen keenly to your surroundings. It makes a tik-tik sound, where its name is taken from, and they especially love to target pregnant mothers. The closer it sounds to you, the farther it is. But the quieter it gets, that means it's getting closer and closer to where you are. This one terrifies me to the core because I've heard first-hand accounts, and yes, I've heard the tik-tik when I was younger. Thankfully, I never got to see it in person. Yet. The Goatman of Poplik. According to legend, he stalks the rural back roads of central Kentucky at night, searching for victims to exact his confused, animalistic vengeance upon. When he sees a car coming, he jumps in front of it, swinging a bloody axe. In the legends I grew up hearing, the Goat Man is a victim of outrageous government experimentation with human-animal hybridization. He escaped from an undisclosed facility somewhere on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River. He supposedly lives under the train tracks in Pope Lick. Kentucky has about 1 million creepy, monster-y urban legends. In Lexington, there's a witch cemetery on Nicholasville Road, near the intersection with Southland Drive. It's fenced in, and I think it's near a hospital. Tearing up a witch cemetery seems like one of the worst ways to start building a hospital. That's just a warm-up. Growing up, I also heard the tale of the Beast of Panther Rock. They say it lives in the remote woods and hills of Anderson County. It's a volatile as hell version of Sasquatch. 7 to 8 feet of hostile Gigantopithecus. I've heard stories of it picking up a prize-winning hog by its back legs and bashing its head in against a locust tree. I've heard stories about farmers in Anderson County waking up in the morning to discover that the mule that guards their flock had its head damn near twisted off in the night. Here's another. In northern Kentucky during the 1970s, legend has it that there was another experiment that escaped from this undisclosed, secret facility. An amphibious, human frog-snake hybrid that lived in the Ohio River near the Kentucky side. It only ventured onto land to drag unsuspecting campers and lone fishermen to a watery death. This is a good one, the Walking Bear of Poortown. Poortown was an old, Reconstruction-era hamlet that stood until the early 1950s. Legend has it that one summer, sometime in the late 1940s, something started stalking Poortown. It was a bear that stood on 2 legs, like a man. Only it never went down on all 4s, and it had an ape's hands. Its eyes glowed red at night. It was a creature that held genuine hate in its heart. There was a man in Poortown who bred and sold hunting dogs to the whole town. The monster decapitated every last one of his dogs by hand. It devours livestock, and it reportedly snatched a 12 to 14-year-old kid who was out working the tobacco field too late. The sheriff rounded up a posse, but they never found the kid or the walking bear. Sightings of the walking bear continued until the whole town just sort of moved away. Midnight mass for the dead always creeped me out when I was a child. There once was a woman from Stossland in the county of West Ogder who was to attend the sermon on Christmas morning. In the middle of the night, she woke up and saw a light coming from inside the church. Not a single churchgoer was in sight. Believing that she had overslept, she rushed out of bed, threw on her best coat, and hurried down to the church. Once inside, the church was full of people, as she had anticipated, but she wondered why she did not know any of those who were there. When the priest had stepped up to the pulpit, she cast a glance at the old woman who was sitting beside her. Rather bewildered, she saw that it was a neighbor of hers who had passed away some time ago. "Get on your coat," said the old hag, "and get out before the priest has finished his sermon. For this is the mass of the dead, and they will kill you if they catch you here." The woman did as her neighbor had said. Not before she had stood up from her seat, they were after her. Just as she rushed out the door, they tore off her coat, and she ran home like crazy. In the morning, when people came to the church to attend the morning mass, only bits of the coat were left behind on the church steps. We have many stories about nightmare-creating creatures in Germany, and this is one of them. One story in particular was something that piqued my eye, and it was about a druid, who is mostly known as a witch or a little golem, sneaking through the forest. The lore says that if you go at night into the forest known to be without any life and not even a noise can be heard of the trees and the wind, then you will be found by a druid. In this case, it is said to be a small creature with claws and spiky ears. But the worst part is that if you can't see it, it will try to jump you back, and you won't even feel a thing because it will directly fuse with your soul and start whispering into your head. It will fill your dreams with nightmares of you scratching out your eyes slowly with his sharp and pointy fingernails, beginning in the middle, so that you can see it coming. It will try to get you mad until you kill every last person that means something to you, and it will consume their souls by doing so until it will, in the end, feast on yours. The legend of the Teufelskanzel, the Devil's Pulpit. This was the time of year when the witches gathered at the Brocken/Blocksberg, a mountain in Germany, to celebrate the witches' Sabbath. The devil was there, of course, and told everyone how strong he is and what a cool devil he is. And as he told me, he was standing on a huge rock. After he had finished his speech, the witches told him that if he would be as strong as he told them, he should take the rock he used as pulpit moments ago and carry it on his tail to Hohe Meisner, another mountain, without a rest. He said, "Nothing is easier than that." He picked up the rock, and away he was. He flew with great speed and thought he would be done in no time and back at the Blocksberg to celebrate further. But apparently the rock got heavier and heavier with every meter he flew. And at some point, he decided he needed to rest. So he watched to see if anyone was nearby, and as he couldn't find anyone, he laid the rock and himself down in the forest underneath him. The witches, on the other hand, thought of this possibility and sent 3 of their kind after him to watch if he could keep his promise. They found him sleeping and began to laugh at him. He awoke and was furious as to how, in holy hell, they could assume he wouldn't keep his promise. He went in the air with anger and ripped 2 of the witches in half straight. He grabbed the last one and went to the bottom of the valley underneath him. His horse leg stretched downward to crush the witch at the bottom of the world. And that's why the river in the valley, the Wera, is shaped almost like a horseshoe. The Devil's Rock is still there today. Right behind the forest is my house. And is known to this day as the Teufelskanzel, the Devil's Pulpit. The Mano Woods. Small people who live in the woods near farmland. They're masters of camouflage. Sometimes, if you're driving along Route 7 in Connecticut, you'll see someone standing at the side of the road, but when you look directly at it, there's nothing. They don't like to interact with people. Sometimes in the winter, they will stay in a barn, but they usually do some simple chores to pay for their stay. Some people leave vegetables or bread out for them, and they'll come at night, take the food, and do some chores. They don't eat meat. They're peaceful and have never hurt anyone or animals. Some bachelor farmers have sighted them from far away. They're small and wear stuff that looks like moss and grass. They're said to have a very basic language. Mostly grunts and gestures. I was talking to a buddy of mine Saturday night, and he told me about a story from when he was in his early 20s and he and his cousin got chased into the house by an insanely large black dog with the body shape of a hyena, long front legs, curved back, and shorter back legs, and it had red eyes. He showed me the dent in the back door, it left, and he showed me pictures of its giant paw print in the mud. It sounds a lot like a similar experience. I had 5 miles and 4 years before his experience. I got chased through the woods on my bike by a large black dog that had reddish eyes that seemed to reflect the light. Wendigo. The creature or spirit could either possess humans or be a monster that had physically transformed from a person. It is particularly associated with cannibalism. The Algonquian believed those who indulged in eating human flesh were at particular risk. The legend appears to have reinforced the practice of cannibalism as a taboo. It is often described in Algonquian mythology as a balance of nature. Basically, you'll be out walking in the woods, and you'll hear something behind you. You turn around, but, of course, there's nothing there. So you keep walking. Hear another twig snap or some leaves on the ground rustle, and you turn around again, see nothing, and tell yourself it's just a squirrel or some other small fauna. This goes on a few more times, increasing in frequency, while your paranoia is mounting and you walk a bit faster just in case, and then you're running and the noises are still following you, and all of a sudden you look around and there's no more trail. That's when the Wendigo strikes, and it will eat you and then go look for someone else, because the Wendigo is also never satisfied with its killing. I spent summers in western Pennsylvania growing up, and every ducking time we had a campfire, my dad would start telling Wendigo stories. I am still terrified of forests and refuse to go in them with a group of less than 3 people, regardless of whether it is day or night. Me and my fiancée were out throwing papers in a very rural part, as was most of my route. Think outside the suburbs, there are still houses here and there, so not in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, we are driving when I see someone running like a bat out of hell towards the road we were traveling on through a cornfield. This is the middle of winter, and it was a beautiful night out. The moon made everything somewhat visible. I am only going about 25 miles per hour as it is because the road conditions are never good in the country, even in the summer. I slow down as it zips past us. It turns out it was a deer, not a human. Running on 2 legs with a massive set of antlers, we both freaked the duck out. I have seen many animals, and I have seen quite a few walking only on 2 legs before. Deer and coyotes, especially if they feel endangered or if one of their front feet is injured, will do this. The only problem was that this thing was ducking booked. It ran just like a human, and its back legs looked way too human, if you know what I mean. This thing was only a few yards in front of us when it passed. And as it passed, it turned its head to look at us. It was all just entirely bizarre. And in the back of my mind, I knew what it was, being half Injun and all. I called my mother, and she said a quick prayer and told me to go ahead and finish my route. We placed a dream catcher in my car after that. Most will know what this is. But I will not say its name. The legend of the Silban tells that a spoiled young man wanted to eat offal, but there was none, so his father went to hunt deer to please his son. There was so much delay that he himself went to see what happened to his father, so he went out to hunt. On the way, he saw that his father had not managed to hunt anything and, in his anger, killed him. The son killed the father, and went to his mother with blood on his hands. His mother, seeing that his father did not return, asked him what had happened. Realizing that he had killed him, was cursed, and was condemned to wander the plains. Dogs chased him, and he got lost. He became a tall, very tall, human-shaped creature. He carries a sack in which he counts the bones of the victim, and that can be heard because he stops near the houses. He also carries a whistle, hence its name, the silban. The louder it is heard, the farther away it is, the softer it is heard, the closer it is. It likes to attack drunks. A local legend from the Ohio area in the good old USA. There's this legend up here and in a couple of surrounding states of the melon heads. They're these tiny little dudes that live out in the forest, and they've got absolutely massive heads. They kind of look like waterlogged children. Well, beyond that, every state's got a different take on the legend. Here's the Ohio version. It starts in Cleveland, a bustling half-metropolis on the edge of the sea like Lake Erie. Cleveland's played host to more than its fair share of serial killers and mysterious disappearances. But the legend of the melon head starts in a little suburb on the outskirts of Cleveland called Kirkland. See, it was there that the enigmatic Dr. Crow, pronounced Crow, ran his orphanage in the 1950s. Due to the poor conditions of the orphanage and the even poorer conditions of the surrounding city, many of the children at this orphanage fell quite sick quite often. But Dr. Crow did not feel it was his duty to heal them. Instead, he used the guise of pediatrics to further his own experiments on the human brain. He injected the children's skulls with fluid and chemicals that he thought would facilitate rapid brain growth, like a sort of early puberty of the mind. It is worth noting that some of these children are already suffering from hydrocephalus. He would then subject the children to harsh, inhumane conditions that eventually led many of them to develop a taste for human flesh, amongst other things. Dr. Crow sought to learn which was the prevalent force in one's life, nature or nurture, the impulsive nature or the logical mind, the man or the monster. However, he would learn, as many did before him, that in the end, the only winners are the karmic forces of the universe. It was both their cunning and their ferocity that led the Melonhead children to victory in their bloody revolt. They killed the horrible Dr. Crow and burned his orphanage to the ground. Ever since then, they've been taken to the woods, unable to live in society. Duendes, elves. My grandmother told my dad and his siblings about a story my grandfather had told her about his encounter with the supernatural. When my grandpa was 19, his cousins and he decided to go. At one point, my grandmother loses consciousness. He wakes up to his two cousins shouting at him to wake up. My grandpa is dazed and confused, but he tells his cousins about the elves. They don't believe him. They ask him where he'll go because they've been looking for him for hours. My grandpa is confused. He doesn't understand what just happened. A year after the incident, my grandpa has a dream. In his dream, he encounters the three elves again. The three elves apologize to him and feel bad about taunting and messing with him in the forest. They tell him that they want to make it up to him by granting him one wish. The catch is that he'll need to find a very special tree in town at midnight, and they tell him he'll know where it is. My grandpa wakes up and can't believe what he just dreamed. He's having a hard time distinguishing reality from dreams. Later that day, he thinks about where the tree can be, and, to his surprise, he knows where it is. The tree belongs to his cousin, and it's the only tree of its kind in the town. That night, my grandpa called his cousin to make sure if it was the tree from his dream, and it is. Midnight hits, but my grandfather never went. He stayed home that night, and that was the last time the elves ever made contact with him. My mom seems to firmly believe in the existence of gnomes or elves, duendes. I asked her quite a long time ago what convinced her so firmly. My mom bought into a lot of new agey stuff near 2003 and gathered a sizable amount of connections with that community. Be it Reiki, crystals, or glass pyramids that collect energy, she knew someone who claimed expertise. One of those friends, Norma, called herself a witch. My mom told me that one day, when she was visiting her, she kept seeing shadows at the edge of her vision. She sat down on a sofa, and it began shaking. She supposedly heard laughter and felt a cold gust of air. She asked Norma, worried about bad vibrations in her house, but she answered it was the gnomes. They don't like to have visitors, apparently. It didn't help that Norma's house had a rather extensive garden. My mom told me this when I was about 8 years old, and it stuck up to the point where it still makes me feel a bit uneasy. I asked her recently if she had made it all, and she denied it. I can't think of a reason she would lie, and it's simple enough to not be outlandish. The Rougarou is a supposedly mythical creature who seeks out misbehaving children and or Catholics who fail to follow the rules of Lent. I say supposedly because I truly believe that there are other things out there, including aliens, Sasquatch, Rougarou, Loch Ness monsters, etc. It has the body of a human and the head of a werewolf. I like to picture it as a Sasquatch with a werewolf head. This happened in South Louisiana, in the woods. It gets very hot down here during the summer. So, To cool off, many of the residents in my town like to enjoy a boat ride down the river for swimming, fishing, or tubing at various sandbars. My favorite sandbar was about a 7 to 10 minute boat ride with maybe 30 feet of sand between the river and the woods/swamp. My sister, my mom, my stepdad, and myself loaded up in my boat and cruised to the sandbar for a late afternoon catfishing trip. It's usually slap full of boats and people, but it was just us. As the sun is going down, my stepdad is telling his bayou stories and claims he can summon the Rougarou. Out of curiosity, my sister and I gave him the go-ahead. We were both in our 20s, BTW. He takes a piece of driftwood in each hand and knocks them together twice, making loud, echoing noises. A few seconds go by, and maybe 100 feet into the woods, something knocks back. We noped out of there real quick. I don't think I've ever loaded the boat so quickly before. I never tried to knock for the Rougarou again, either. My roommate in college was a first-generation American from Ireland, and her mother told me the story of the banshee in her Irish village when she was a little girl. Apparently, just about everybody in their tiny village had encountered the banshee at one point or another, but her story took place when she was a teenager. She was about 16 to 17 and had snuck out of her house in the middle of the night to meet up with friends. It was about 3 a.m., and she and a couple of girls were walking down a residential street back home when they heard this deep wailing and moaning. She said she thought it might be a wounded animal, but as they kept walking, it sounded more and more like a woman crying. Then they saw a woman on the steps of the house of an elderly neighbor. She appeared to be in her early 20s, and she was described as being sort of illuminated from within. It was a dark street, but the girls could see her as if she was just sort of lit up and brighter than the dark nighttime surroundings. She was wailing and incredibly loud, and the girls were wondering why nobody was noticing her causing such a scene. It was cold, but the woman was wearing a thin nightgown, had wild hair, was beating her chest, and looked like she had lost her mind. The girls were freaked out, and just as one of them began to walk up the steps to see if the woman needed help, the woman got quieter and quieter but was still making the motions of wailing and screaming. It was like the volume was being turned down. Simultaneously, her brightness and the light that had illuminated her dimmed until she just sort of disappeared. The girls were freaked out and hurried home quickly, unsure if it was the beer that caused them to simultaneously hallucinate or what. Supposedly, the next morning, word spread that the old man who lived in the house where the banshee had been had died the night before. The girls didn't tell their parents about what they saw because they didn't want to get in trouble for sneaking out. I grew up in Newfoundland, which is an island off the east coast of Canada. The entire province has mountainous woodland terrain. Folklore is very popular, especially among the older generations. There are stories that have been circulating for decades about people getting led astray by the fairies. It's even said that if you walk in the woods where fairies have been spotted, you should carry breadcrumbs in your pocket because it prevents them from tricking you and carrying you away. I haven't seen any fairies, but I have seen some pretty remarkable things. One night a few years ago, I was walking through the woods behind my mom's house when I saw two bright blue lights floating in front of a few trees. I don't know what came over me, but I shouted, "What's that?" and briskly walked towards them. As I got closer, they started to move away from me, but they floated forward in a circular motion, and I could vaguely make out a faint silhouette of translucent blue arms. And then they were gone. At the time, I had no idea what they could be, and we don't have any bioluminescent creatures here either. After some research, I'm positive that what I saw that night were two will-o'-the-wisps. This one is strange. I was only 4 or 5 years old. So I woke up one night, and there was a shadow person in my room. Except it was short like a child and dressed like a medieval jester. I calmly stared at it for 3 seconds, and then it began to slowly descend to the floor. As it made its descent, I quickly turned away because I got scared, and that's when I saw that the same exact shadow shape was descending in unison with the other shadow. I remember it like it was yesterday and think about it often. It was definitely one of the coolest things I have ever seen. I had a folklore teacher who told me that it sounded like something the fairies would do, but she wasn't sure. I live in Iceland. We have a deep mythology of elves and supernatural beings here. The West Fjords are a terrifyingly beautiful place, with steep cliffs and long, winding fjords. It is very remote and difficult to access, and it is the oldest part of Iceland. We were driving and taking advantage of the long daylight hours, sun at 1 a.m., but the weather turned bad, and we decided to sleep in the Jeep on a hill very close to the sea cliffs. Now, we all fell asleep quickly to the sound of mighty waves crashing on the cliffs and the Jeep being hit with rain and sea spray. My friend and I had very similar vivid dreams and nightmares that night. We both dreamt we were kidnapped by mermen. Not Little Mermaid mermen, but these are scary mother duckers with big teeth and ugly faces. There are little details I remember, like one merman showing me a spine on its face and telling me that it was poisonous, like the same way a stingray's barbs are poisonous, and if we didn't comply, it would sting us and we'd be dead in an instant. They showed us this incredible technology and a projector thing that could show you your sins. Something told me that if the sin was too great, we weren't going back home. My greatest sins were played in front of everyone, and I felt like I passed some sort of test, and we were then shown this complex. It seemed like Atlantis was very futuristic. I also got the sense that we were deep underwater. Well, after this tour, we were brought back to the surface. My friend had a similar dream, mainly remembering men walking out from the sea, with different details, but we both agreed that it was very strange to have dreams of being kidnapped by mermaid people. Well, this could all just be crazy dreams. On the way back, we stopped at the Sea Monster Museum in Baljudalar, and they have an old drawing of a merman that is eerily similar to what we dreamt about. We were both very unsettled by this. So if you camp near the southern tip of Flokalandur, close to the haunted cave from Gisela's saga, there is a chance you might meet an actual mermaid. But watch out, they are not babies, they are instead fish people who will eat you if you are a bad person on the inside. I used to always get creeped out by one my dad used to tell, called the West Point Light. My father grew up along the Rappahannock River near Saluda, Virginia. There's a nearby town called West Point that we used to drive through on our way to the Urbana Oyster Festival every year. It was a family tradition for a lot of years and had been a big part of his teen/early adult years too. Anyway, the legend goes that on a foggy night in the 1880s, a train was coming through town when it suddenly derailed. The only casualty was a single crewman, who was decapitated in the accident. His head was found next to his still illuminated lantern. Nowadays, on humid, misty nights, people have reported seeing a mysterious light bobbing along the tracks. Some report that it looks like a dim flashlight that will come and go as you watch it. The belief is that it is the crewman walking the tracks with his lantern, searching for his missing head. My dad said he and his high school buddies went up to the tracks once to see if they could see the light, which they did, promptly shat themselves, and got the heck out of there. The Bridgewater Triangle. Located in southeastern Massachusetts is the Bridgewater Triangle, an area of about 200 square miles that has been the site of legends and curses for centuries and has been said to be home to strange phenomena including ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, and strange creatures. At the center of the region is Hockomock Swamp, which was long used by the Wampanoag Indian tribe before European colonists arrived. Before them, other indigenous people are known to have lived in the area, as human artifacts have been discovered that date back 9,000 years. From about 300 AD to colonial times, Native Americans depended on the swamp as an abundant source of game. These people revered the swamp for its bounty and used some areas for sacred burial grounds. The Wampanoag both worshipped and feared the area, as the chief deity of death and disease, called Hobomok, was said to dwell in the swamp. Among many Algonquian tribes, Hobomok was often destructive, evil, and usually in opposition to Katahtawit, the great creator god. The Wampanoag people named the swamp Hockomock, meaning place where spirits dwell. Early English colonists called it Devil's Swamp. Since colonial times, bizarre reports have been told about the Triangle area, including giant snakes, strange creatures, ghosts, and missing people. In more modern times, reports include people having seen Bigfoot, UFOs, ominous black helicopters, mysterious balls of light, poltergeist activity, and cattle mutilations. Early on, the forest was said to have been home to a race of diminutive humanoid creatures known as Pukwudgies. Long known in Delaware and Wampanoag Indian folklore, these troll-like creatures, generally described as being about 3 to 4 feet tall with smooth, hairy gray skin and large ears, have a notorious reputation for mischief and mayhem. They were once said to have been friendly to humans but later turned against them. These evil little beings have been blamed for people who have fallen from cliffs, disappeared, or mysteriously died. The forest has been known as the site of various cult activities, which are said to have included animal sacrifice and ritualistic murders committed by admitted Satanists. Near Freetown and Fall River, mutilated animals were found in the 1990s that were believed to have been the work of one of these cults. The density of forest has also been used by other killers, leaving behind the remains of their victims. Mo Sin-a, demonic god, or sometimes called the Girl in Red, is a Taiwanese ghost, monster, or spirit. There is no clear definition of what it actually is. There are multiple different appearances of it: a short, small girl in red clothes and a tall, white-skinned woman with makeup. According to legends, it lives in the mountains and is familiar with nature and the landscape. It likes pulling pranks on the weak, lures old people into mountains, and feeds them with dirt, grass, and cow poop disguised as tasty meals. But it doesn't hurt them, so the victims are almost always found unharmed, with no clue what really happened. They're usually found the next day in some weird but obvious place, and the search team wonders how they missed it the day before. There is one incident where an old lady was kidnapped. When she was found, she said the demon was gone. An old couple came and gave her food, told her where to hide from the rain, and kept chatting to comfort her before the rescue team found her. This couple is said to be the local protecting spirit and his wife, protecting the old lady from being harmed. What's fascinating is that these stories have been around for centuries and still happen today. Many even claim to witness one. When I was around 4 years old, I went to my grandparents' house for my very first solo sleepover. I remember playing in their guest room and always having my attention drawn to a specific corner of the room. Anyway, that evening, I went to bed soundly. I woke up right around dawn, and I can remember clearly seeing a small humanoid figure walking across the windowsill of the window facing east. I remember the dawn light creating a sort of silhouetted image of this thing, but I could tell it was wearing clothing, and from the waist down, it had a sort of transparent look to it. As it neared the end of the windowsill, I can remember it noticing me watching it, and it quickly hopped off the sill into the dark corner of the room that always seemed to draw my attention. A few years ago, I was visiting my mother, and I brought it up. She said she vividly remembers picking me up that morning, and I was scared out of my wits to the point where I'd refused to even enter the same room to gather my toys. I've run this encounter through my head more times than I can count, trying my best to dismiss it as a childhood dream. But 30 years later, that memory sticks out in my mind as clear as day. Banshee is a figure in Irish folklore who is the forerunner of death. As a child, I remember my grandmother telling me that my grandfather had taken ill in the back room of their house. She was attending to him when she heard a loud banging on the front door and left my grandfather to go and answer it. She told me that as she approached the door, she could hear a sobbing noise coming from outside, but on opening the door, there was no one on the other side. She immediately went back to my grandfather, finding him stone dead in the bed. Fast forward to November 2001, and I was at my grandmother's house. She had only been given a few days to live, and my father thought it was a good idea to come out and say my last goodbyes. Rather, unfortunately, she was going through a slow, painful death. I remember going to her bedroom and feeling very cold. I knew that the few days were, realistically, a matter of hours at the most. As my grandmother's breathing became shallower, my dad said it was probably better that I sit in the front room. He called my aunt's boyfriend and asked him to come and pick me up. While I was waiting, I heard a knock on the door. I assumed it was my aunt's boyfriend. As I approached the door, I could hear crying. As I touched the lock to open the door, I suddenly felt a chill down my spine. There was no one there. Almost instantaneously, I heard a mixture of prayers and sobbing coming from the back room. I knew she was gone. As I closed the door, I saw a glimpse of what can only be described as a tall, thin woman sitting and crying on the neighbor's wall. The experience has stayed with me forever. When I was a teenager, me and 2 friends were helping my mom bring in groceries. It was dusk in late summer, and the sky was getting dark. Out of thin air, a massive black dog appeared. It was the size of a very, very large wolf, but it was not a wolf, it was clearly a black dog of some sort. It looked very much like the Grim from Harry Potter, which is the closest way I can describe it. We all froze and stared at it. It happened super fast. It was just standing there in between us and the car, looking at us. What made it a supernatural event was that the dog was a holograph, or at least it appeared that way. The outline of its body seemed to glow and shift, almost like a computer glitch. Its eyes also seemed to glow with a yellow light from within. Then it ran straight into the side of the house and disappeared into thin air. Me and my friends all looked at each other, like, "Did you see that?" Obviously, the black dog is an omen and is popular in European folklore. I'm in the US, but does anyone have any other insight on the Great Black Dog? Anyone else seen it or knows what it means for it to appear? Here in Norway, we have lots of supernatural creatures. I can mention 3 from where I live. 1. Nokin, a creature who lives in wooden lakes and can take any shape. The most common shape is a beautiful white horse, which people can't resist riding on, and then they are dragged underwater. And another popular shape is a fiddler who can enchant people into walking into the water. 2. Huldra. Huldra is a creature who belongs to the creatures we refer to as the subterranean. A kind of supernatural creature who lives beneath the earth's surface. Huldra is the most known, as she is being held responsible for luring shepherds with her to her domain, which benefits the earth. She appears to be a beautiful Scandinavian girl, except she has a cowtail, which is the way to spot her. 3. Trolls. Trolls have always been in Norse mythology and have their counterparts all over the world. So I guess most of you know what trolls are. Almost every place in Norway has its own troll story. I can tell my place's local troll story tomorrow. One common thing for all supernatural creatures in Norway was that if you threw steel or silver over their heads, their spell was broken or they could even die. I grew up mostly in the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico. I am not of Hispanic descent, but I have been told numerous times of a gnome named El Duende. Either my friends or their family have told me the story. Apparently, he is a troll that will come out at different times in a Hispanic household. He likes to mess with the children or scare them. I went to my friend Roman's house one night. He had told me of this phenomenon, and I never actually believed it. That was until El Duende actually appeared in his front yard. We were playing outside, and there went a gnome shadow. My friend actually tried going after it, but I was too freaked out by the incident. After we couldn't see it anymore, he just laughed it off as if it were a normal, everyday experience. I was over again a year or so later. This time I was just about to fall asleep in his room when, out of the corner of my eye, this gnome shadow came right into the room. It ran a path to the window and disappeared. I still had my suspicions after many years. Was someone messing with me, or was this the infamous El Duende? I am a lot older now, and I still hear the story. One night, I was sitting alone in my house when I saw a shadow run by my windowsill and jump towards the ground. It ran around and even went behind furniture to come out on the other side. I said to myself, dang that, El Duende. What didn't make sense to me was that I don't live in a Hispanic household, and my girlfriend is not of Mexican descent either. I have been very confused, and I still catch glimpses of this troll. Has anyone else experienced this? What type of explanation could there be? Does El Duende wander your home? What types of stories were you told about El Duende? From the stories I was told, this is a troll that wanders Mexican households. No one of any other race has ever mentioned this to me. I have also watched the show Fact or Faked, where they show a video of some children freaking out over a gnome shadow. This is where I was reintroduced to the gnome. The gnome in the video looks just like the one I have seen. Now he lurks in my house. I'm from Australia, and when I was 8 years old, my family lived in a house off the Pacific Highway. It backed off to bushland and that it sounded exactly like her. She eventually comforted me and convinced me it was my imagination. The next week went by as normal until one night I awoke to a tapping and scratching noise. I looked around, and when my eyes adjusted to the light, I couldn't see anything in my room, so I just assumed it was an animal on the walls or roof. Possums quite commonly come into the house for warmth and to nest in Australia. So I tried to get back to sleep. It went on for what felt like half an hour, so I looked around again and listened closely to the noise. That was when I saw something in my peripherals at my window. I gazed over and saw what, to this day, still gives me nightmares. I'm 26 now. It was a thin figure, about 2 inches wide. It had elongated arms and fingers. All black and white eyes. It was tapping on my window while staring right at me. I stared at it for a moment, not believing what I was seeing, thinking I must be dreaming. For some reason, I just felt like it was toying with me, like it was saying, I'm coming to get you. Fear took over. I stuffed my head under the blanket and screamed as loudly as I could mum. I didn't stop screaming and didn't hear my mom come in. When she grabbed the blanket to see what was wrong, I jumped back, thinking that whatever the hell was outside my window had gotten in. She asked, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I pointed over to the window and said, "That." It was gone, and she asked me, "What was it?" I explained what I had seen slowly, as I was trembling and could barely get the words out to describe it. She said I could come sleep in her room. I didn't get any sleep that night or the next few nights afterwards. I can still see the image in my mind as clearly as the night it happened, 18 years ago. It has made me afraid of the dark. I sleep with the lights or TV on still. I've tried to rationalize it. I've tried to find answers in paranormal sightings, folklore, and dreamtime stories. I thought I found the answer when, about 5 years ago, I learned about Mimi spirits. They resembled what I saw at first until I read and discuss with elders that they are small and shy and are in no way harmful. They look after the land and don't like interacting with other beings. So I crossed that off as a possibility. I have no idea what it was, but I have a feeling that it was the thing that called my name, mimicking my mother's voice. Much like a skinwalker does. However, we have no tales of those in Australia. The closest thing to that here is the bunyip. A shapeshifter that lives in billabongs attacks passing travelers. Well, there were no bodies of water nearby, so I also crossed that off. I have thought maybe it was all in my head, that my mother was right, just my imagination. Yet still, the image is so strongly imprinted on me, as is the voice. I had no idea if it was real or if it was something trying to lure me away. What I do know is that I will remember it till the day I die. In Mexican folklore, there's a story of a dismembered, hairy hand that will tickle misbehaving children who don't go to sleep when they're told to. Essentially, it's a boogeyman, do what parents say monster. There are probably several variations, but this is what I grew up with. When I was 3, I was sleeping on the bottom bunk bed and awoke to something tapping my right hand. There were 2 large drawers where my sister and I kept all of our toys beneath the bed. Whatever was tapping me was coming from the drawer under me. Before I opened my eyes, I just felt this frantic, or enthusiastic, tapping on my hand. I remember the slapping sound too. My parents would leave the hallway light on to help my sister and I sleep comfortably, so I saw what was waking me up viscerally. I opened my eyes and saw this large hand curving up from beneath my bottom bunk, slapping my hand. Imagine man hands from Seinfeld. It was green, like the color of pea soup. It had black hair on the back of its hand that traveled up its fingers. The fingernails were also green, though short. Maybe it got Imani before visiting me, its skin was really dry. I distinctly remember how coarse the skin felt. When I started moving my hand, it almost looked like it was signing to me. It looked like it was signing Y in ASL. I have no idea what that would even translate to in dismembered hand language. But I remember it moving its fingers and hand like it was trying to tell me something. I squealed, shut my eyes, and shoved my hand under the pillow. I started screaming frantically for my parents, and I could hear my sister shifting above me. Both my parents ran in, and I'm obviously inconsolable. My dad told me it was just him teasing me, and then my memory of the rest of the night stops there. The next morning at breakfast, I was eating pancakes with my family. I asked why Dad was playing a prank on me and tapping my hand from under the bed. My parents tensely look at each other and change the subject. I feel like I will never have an answer to what I experienced. The rest of my arm was covered by my blanket. So my one theory is that it thought I was another severed hand. Is that even possible? For years as a kid, I thought I saw it a couple of times. And that it would run around with other hands, pure black, pure white, those might have been nightmares. I started dreaming then about being tickled and suffocated by severed hands and feet. It sounds almost comical, but it was terrifying. What's wild to me is that my cousin, who was the same age as me, also experienced a severed green hand chasing her up the basement steps until she shut the door on it. I also have a friend who, without knowing anything about my experience, told me his cousin saw a green, dismembered hand try and coax her into her bedroom closet late at night. She was about 3 or 4 at the time. So if you know Mexican or Hispanic folklore, you know about La Llorona. My mom was 10 years old and lived next to a small ditch next to a highway. She stayed at her friend's house, which was a little closer to the ditch. The day went normal, riding bikes, playing, typical girl stuff. Then night came, and they knew it was time to get home once the street lights came on. They were sitting in the friend's bedroom with the radio on, listening to music, and playing a card game. It was already dark out, and the music from the stereo filled the room. Now, my mom's friend lives with her mom and grandma, who both speak fluent Spanish. My mom understood it but could not speak it. My mom developed this overwhelming sense of anxiety and terror. Then it started crying. The girls both heard it, but brushed it off as a cat or a drunken neighbor. Soon, the crying began to become louder and more obnoxious, like it wanted to be heard. The girls paused what they were doing, staring out the window. Once they looked that way, the crying became ear-splitting, so loud it resonated over the stereo. Both girls had hands over their ears, fearful of what was happening. The grandma burst into the room, holy water in one hand and a rosary in the other. She was screaming over the crying, praying in Spanish. My mom says that when she did this, the radio started to static and the lights began to flicker. Both the crying and the praying were booming extremely loudly until it all stopped. The grandma said a prayer over my mom and her granddaughter and made them go into the living room, instructing them not to return to that room for the night and not to look out the window. My mom returned home in the morning, not speaking of what had happened. Even when she tells the story now, an overwhelming sense of fear takes over, and she gets goosebumps. The Owl Witch. This happened when I was only a few weeks old, and my mother decided to go to Monterrey, Mexico, to show me her family, who lived there. When we got there, my mother told me that her family had decided to have a big party to celebrate our arrival. She explained how everyone wanted to hold me and showered me with gifts as I was the first child of my mother. When it was over, my grandmother took my mom and me to the guest bedroom, where we would be sleeping. My grandma bought an old school bassinet for me to sleep in while my mother slept in a bed on the other side of the room. My mom put me in the bassinet and put 2 small pillows beside me because she was afraid of me accidentally bumping my head. As we got settled, my grandma's Rottweiler named Rocky came in. He didn't want to leave, so he stayed in our room since he was relatively gentle. It was very hot that night, so to let some air in, my mom opened a sliding glass door that led to a balcony. We were on the second floor, so she felt safe leaving it open. Soon after, she got settled in and went to sleep. It was around 3 a.m. when my mom awoke to the loud growls and barks of Rocky. It was strange to her because he had never acted this way. He was relatively quiet and gentle, so this was alarming to her. She then heard me crying and rushed to my aid. She was left shocked and speechless at what she could make out in the dark. I was flipped on my stomach, face down, on the mattress. She immediately ran to pick me up and turned her attention to Rocky, who was still growling and barking uncontrollably. She looked up at the balcony and saw it. She described the creature as the ugliest, most gigantic owl she had ever seen before. Its mouth and wings were wide open, and its feathers were black as coal. Rocky ran to the balcony in an attempt to catch it, but the owl quickly flew away into the darkness. My grandpa quickly came into the room after hearing the commotion. He came to check on us, and he found my mother in the middle of the room, on the floor, holding me like if she were shielding me, and Rocky barking by the balcony into the sky. My mother found a scratch on my leg. She also noticed that the pillows that she had used to keep my head in place were on the other side of the room, as if they were tossed out of the way. Today, my mother tells me that I survived an attempt by La Lechuza. Mexican legend says that La Lechuza is a creature, specifically a witch, who sold her soul to the devil in exchange for power, giving her the ability to transform into a monster, a giant owl. It is said that La Lechuza goes to hunt at night for any potential victims, like animals and drunk people. But, more preferably, she loves to hunt for children. Children to snatch and take back to her hut in the mountains, where she would devour them or sacrifice. Whenever I go visit my family, they always call me Lechuzita as a remembrance of surviving the Lechuza's attempt. The real hero here, though, is my grandma's dog, Rocky. He's the one who stopped the owl from doing anything else and chased it away. If it weren't for him, I don't know what else could have happened. Sadly, he passed away this year. I couldn't get to see him beforehand, as I live in the US, but I'll always remember him as a hero. My mother bought Rocky at least 10 bags of treats for protecting us that night, the day after the incident, BTW. I'm 17 years old today, and I still have a small scar on my leg, in the same place where my mom told me the owl had scratched me. Though I know logically that it could have been just a regular, oddly gigantic owl, it doesn't explain why it would have come in the house, picked up and tossed the pillows beside me, and left me face planted with a small scratch that never healed properly. I grew up in Mexico and always heard about duendes, more than one. According to what I have been told by older relatives, there are both good and bad. The good kind have been seen as small shadows of playing around with children. My aunt this one time saw my 2 little cousins run playing tag and a third little shadow behind them. This good kind of dude doesn't do harm, supposedly. Then there's the bad, evil kind. I would hear stories of duendes stealing babies and also killing babies in their sleep. As you can see, babies and children seem more targeted than adults since they have innocent souls. But I have also heard of trickster dudes, where they steal things and you can't ever find them. They move your shoes around, and you have a hard time finding them as well. They throw small things at you. They pull your pillow at night, as experienced by my older sister. Pull your feet, tickle them, or touch them. I will put a sock on your mouth at night. Knock on doors. Steal jewelry. Or an earring, things of that sort. I also hear they like to play in abandoned houses and old trees. The Black Shuck? Late last night, around 11 p.m. CST, in South Texas, I was walking past the double French doors that lead to the backyard. I'd forgotten to turn on the backyard light, as usual, and so I approached the light switch, just to the right of the doors. I stood for a moment, getting the sensation that something, or maybe even someone, was lurking about on the back porch. I'd had my fair share of the same impression before, only to find an opossum or whatever once I'd turned the back porch light on. Except this time, it felt different. Something felt off. I turned the porch light on but didn't see anything right away, just some of my husband's tools that he'd left out when we rehung the back fence a few nights ago. I went to the kitchen to grab some food, then walked back towards the living room and glanced out the backyard doors again. There was a silvery yellow thing far in the back near the new fence, where an old tree stump used to be. It looked like it was glowing. I stood there, confused. At first, I thought maybe it was the reflective lights on one of the bikes that was hung up on the shed, but what I was looking at was well below the bottom wheel of the largest bike, almost as if it were crouched down. And then, whatever it was, turned its head towards the back of the house. I had been looking at a profile view of it. With the light from the back porch, I distinctly saw the eyeshine of 2 eyes, a long, pointed snout, and pointed ears. This thing, for all intensive purposes, looked like a large black dog, about the size of a large German shepherd, except it was blacker than black. And I realized, with a sinking feeling in my gut, that I could not see the back gate because there was a thick, black mist around this thing. I felt afraid. One of the first things my brain went to was werewolf. Wait, no, this thing is much smaller. What is it? It looks like a dog. I know we tend to have stray dogs in our neighborhood, so I yelled to my husband, who was sitting on the couch at this point, "There's something in the backyard." I ran for the bedroom, where I had my 32-pound recurve bow. We're an archery family, since they're quieter than guns, so I grabbed the one thing I knew could give me range. We presently have a problem with large and aggressive dogs in our neighborhood that have been documented killing cats and assaulting joggers, so yes, I armed myself because I wasn't going to take any chances. My husband stayed by the back door, looking for the thing. I was gone for about 30 seconds. He said he didn't see anything but understood that I wouldn't have strung my bow unless I meant business. He's not as sensitive to vibes and spooks like I am, and he knows it. Rarely, he'll sense something that doesn't feel right when we're looking at houses. When I got back to the back door, my husband opened it, and I stepped out with my bow drawn. I know that sounds absolutely crazy, like something out of a movie, but it was all I had to work with. I called out loudly, "Who's there?" And I aimed my arrow where I had last seen the thing. I am a decent shot with my bow, but not the best, but all I had to aim at was this thick, black mist where the creature was before. I still couldn't see the back gate for the mist. Bear in mind that our neighbor to the west of us has a yard light that normally spills into the back corner of our yard near the back gate. Even with that light, the mist was so thick I couldn't even see the tall grass in the area. I remember calling out into the night, "Whoever you are, you need to leave now. I am armed and prepared to shoot." And to my horror, this black mist suddenly bounded up over the back gate, which is about 6.5 feet high, and disappeared as if it were being sucked out of the yard. All of a sudden, I could see the back gate again, the ground, and everything else that I normally see at night with our back porch light and the neighbor's yard light. The thing was gone. In my mind, I was trying to piece together what I had seen, and the first word that jumped into my head was black shuck. But it gets weirder. I was aware of the black shuck being a creature from folklore because I have a casual interest in that sort of thing, but I also knew that seeing one wasn't exactly the best news. I messaged a close uncle of mine, and he said he'd seen something similar run through his yard the night before, and he lives halfway across the country. He said one of his kids also saw something similar, except in the daytime. I still have my bow strung. I realize that we recently moved the fence back to the property line. It's a privacy fence, so perhaps, whatever it was, I was used to sleeping behind the back gate at night. Still, it had no business lurking in my yard. I hope I didn't offend it by pointing an arrow at it. I just want it to stay away and not bring illness to my family.